Behind the curtain, the final months of Joni Lamb. I want you to imagine something for a second. You've been setting aside a portion of your hard-earned money every single month, making sacrifices, skipping a dinner out, stretching your budget, all so you can write a check to a ministry you deeply believe in. You're trusting them. You're trusting that your money is going out into the world to do good. And then one morning, you wake up and discover your donations were funding luxury private jets, $100,000 beach vacations, and a toxic secret family war. That's not the plot of a streaming drama. That's the story an investigative YouTube channel called Behind the Altar pulled the receipts on. And today, we're unpacking their meticulous look into the final months of Joni Lamb, co-founder of the billion-dollar Christian broadcasting empire Daystar Television Network, who passed away in May of 2026. This isn't just the story of a wealthy founder passing on. We're talking about a $40 million personal estate, a multi-state real estate portfolio worth over $11 million, and a behind-the-scenes battle for control of a massive global media network. It is a masterclass in the tension between a pristine public ministry and a deeply chaotic private reality. And at the center of it all, a $3 million beach condo, a secret battle with cancer, and one quietly filed legal document that changed everything, 8 weeks before Joni died. But to understand the ending, we have to rewind to the beginning. Specifically, to Joni's second marriage, to a man named Doug Weiss. The marriage counselor Doug Weiss is a Colorado Springs psychologist and author who runs a center called Heart to Heart Counseling. His specialty? Sex addiction and intimacy counseling. Couples in the middle of infidelity, broken trust, fractured marriages pay him thousands of dollars for intensive, multi-day therapy. He was, by every account, widely regarded as the marriage expert, and that expertise made him a frequent guest on Daystar Television. In fact, before Joni's first husband, Marcus Lamb, Daystar's co-founder, died on November 30th, 2021, Marcus sat across from Doug Weiss on live television and praised Doug's wife of over 30 years, saying she had the purest heart. It was a small moment on air, but it told the audience everything. Marcus trusted Doug as a man whose private life matched exactly what he preached: stable marriage, devoted wife, solid foundation. That was the brand. Then Marcus Lamb died, and a very short time later, Doug Weiss made a massive change of his own. How short? 57 days. 57 days after Marcus's death, on January 27, 2022, Doug Weiss filed for divorce from his wife of 30 years. He didn't issue a press release. The divorce was quietly granted in May of 2022, but Doug kept it hidden from the public for 8 more months, all the way until February of 2023. Think about that disconnect. A man whose entire brand, his TV appearances, his lucrative counseling practice, is built on radical honesty and healing through truth. And for 8 months, he was secretly divorced while presenting himself as America's leading marriage expert. Here's the part that stops me cold. During those 8 hidden months, was he still taking on vulnerable clients? He was. The source material notes that journalist Julie Roys spoke with 7 former female clients, women in some of the most painful seasons of their lives, many dealing with unfaithful husbands, paying this man to help them rebuild trust. They described feeling gaslit, shamed for asking questions, more traumatized walking out than walking in. Think about what that means. If you go to a therapist because you were lied to by your spouse, your radar for deception is already on high alert. Finding out the person treating that wound is hiding a massive secret of his own doesn't just break a professional boundary. It replicates the exact trauma the patient is paying him to heal. It's a bit like a financial advisor who takes you on while you're facing bankruptcy, desperate, terrified of losing your home, and charges you a fortune to save your life savings, all while secretly filing for his own bankruptcy behind closed doors. He's using your desperation to mask his own failure, while projecting an image of perfect financial health. The issue was never that the marriage ended. Marriages end. The issue is the active concealment, while profiting off the appearance of an intact one. The courtship, so now picture it. A newly secretly divorced counselor, a recently widowed media mogul, and a Daystar ministry jet that starts flying some very specific routes. Starting in October 2022, that jet made 24 round-trip flights from Fort Worth, Texas, to Colorado Springs, where Doug lived and worked. Another 13 round trips went to Destin, Florida, near the beach property the couple would later buy. Estimated cost of those flights over $769,000. Now, you might be thinking, Joni Lamb ran a billion-dollar media company. CEOs use corporate jets all the time. Why is this a scandal? Here's the difference. A publicly traded company has a board, SEC regulations, shareholders demanding accountability. A family-run religious nonprofit operates in a completely different universe. That $769,000 didn't come from selling software. It came from viewer donations, tithes. Money given by people trusting it would spread the gospel, not fund a courtship. When the founders of a family ministry have unchecked access to the organization's assets, and there's no independent board to say no, the line between a ministry expense and a personal luxury disappears completely. How do you justify nearly $1 million in courtship flights to your donors? You don't, because you don't tell them. And it didn't stop at the flights. When Joni and Doug married, documentation later emerged showing Joni charged a $100,000 honeymoon to the Daystar Ministry credit card. She did eventually reimburse it, but only after the charges became public. Which raises the obvious question. If no one had ever found out, would that $100,000 have just quietly stayed on the ministry's books forever? The family war. While all this was happening, it wasn't just burning through donor money. It was burning bridges at home. Joni's son Jonathan, along with her other children Rachel and Rebecca, opposed the marriage on what they called biblical grounds. That phrase might sound like a strong personal disagreement to outsiders, but in a religious media empire, theology is corporate governance. If the heirs are rejecting the founder's marriage on biblical grounds, they're not having a family squabble. They're challenging the CEO's legitimacy and moral authority outright. A close family friend, Denise Boggs, even wrote a heartfelt letter begging the family to intervene before the wedding. It didn't work, and instead of reconciliation, the retaliation was severe. Jonathan and his wife Susie refused to publicly endorse the marriage on the network, and they were systematically pushed out, fired, demoted. According to the source, even tracked and followed. The empire was tearing itself apart. And here's the layer almost no one saw. While this boardroom-style family war raged, and while her children were being pushed out of the ministry their father built, Joni was hiding something else entirely. She was secretly battling metastatic bone cancer. She kept it hidden for a long time, but by the spring of 2026, her decline was becoming visible. On April 29th, she and Doug were no-shows at a birthday celebration for her close friend Paula White, a major figure in that world, and an event Joni would never normally miss. For the people closest to her, that absence was the red flag. When Joni died on May 7, 2026, her own son Jonathan wasn't even called to say goodbye. The deed. Now here's where it gets fascinating. Because Joni Lamb was not a naive or passive woman. She'd survived a very public scandal years earlier involving her first husband's affair. She co-ran one of the largest Christian TV networks in the world for 4 decades. She knew exactly how power, leverage, and money worked. And knowing she was dying, knowing her family was completely torn apart, she made one final, calculated legal move. In March 2026, just 8 weeks before she died, Joni filed a quitclaim deed on a beach condo in Destin, Florida. Here's why that matters. A quitclaim deed quickly and quietly transfers ownership of a property. Joni and Doug had bought this condo together, just 3 months after their wedding, for roughly $2.9 million, jointly owned marital property. This deed pulled that $2.9 million asset out of their joint ownership and moved it into Joni's own personal revocable trust. Why does that matter so much? Because assets in a revocable trust bypass probate court entirely when you die. No public legal battles, and more importantly, it instantly strips the asset out of the marital estate. In one document, Joni removed Doug Weiss's claim to a $3 million property, mere weeks before she passed away. Was this simply responsible estate planning for a woman worth $40 million? Or was she deliberately, quietly protecting her children's inheritance from a man she'd been married to for less than 3 years? A man who'd watched her son get fired, and who, according to her daughter-in-law, gave the family no chance to say goodbye at her deathbed. A woman with her level of business savvy doesn't file a document like that without a very specific intention. The silence. You'd expect a man who built his entire career on radical honesty to have something to say about all this. Instead, Doug Weiss's response was notable for what it lacked. When Joni died, he issued a brief, measured statement. Today I lost my wife, Joni. There are no words that really capture the weight of that sentence, or the grief that comes with it. Grief is real. We don't discount that. But there was no mention of her health timeline, no explanation of Daystar's succession, no acknowledgement of Jonathan being locked out, and absolutely no response to the questions swirling around that quitclaim deed. For a man who built an entire brand and a lucrative counseling business on helping people have the hardest, most uncomfortable conversations of their lives, that silence is striking. When it came to the uncomfortable truths of his own timeline, the 57-day window, the donor-funded flights, the fractured family, the last-minute legal maneuvering, he chose to say nothing at all. Underscore where it stands. The fallout remains completely unresolved. As of the end of this investigation, Jonathan Lamb is still locked out of the Daystar building, despite the fact that Marcus Lamb left a signed, written directive naming Jonathan as his successor. Doug Weiss is a widower on the outside, with unclear ties to the future of the empire. And a massive estate is being quietly contested behind closed doors. Whether you're evaluating a charity to give to, sitting on a nonprofit board, or just consuming media from a massive network, this saga is a lesson in why transparency and structural oversight matter. Because when accountability disappears at the top, it's always the people who fund the organization, the viewers, the donors, the believers, who are left in the dark, footing the bill. You give your money expecting one thing. The reality behind the curtain is something else entirely. So here's the thought I'll leave you with. If one quietly filed quitclaim deed on a $3 million condo has the power to expose the fractured foundations of a billion-dollar empire, how many other quietly signed documents are, right now, governing the institutions that shape our culture and our beliefs?